before a crowd of supporters already claiming victory in that June runoff. The first thing out of her mouth after taking the podium earlier this evening was to thank President Trump for his endorsement. Even in the media gaggle to follow, she brought up his policies and his instrumental leadership as one of the reasons as to why she was able to make it to this runoff. One of the things that she said that she really wanted to help strengthen was the border, also touting some of President Trump's policies, as well as education and our economy. As you know, so many of us are struggling right now with just trying to fill up our gas tanks. She wants to open up Louisiana to energy production once again. But again, she's already claiming victory in that June runoff and had this to say before the crowd just a few moments ago.
Tonight, Louisiana sent a clear message that they want a candidate to represent them in the Senate who will always put America first and never turn her back on Louisiana voters.
And again, Julia also talking about that decision by former Senator Bill Cassidy to impeach Donald Trump as one of the reasons why he fell short in this race. Again, Julia is set to embark on that runoff election next month along with Fleming. Guys, I'll send things back to you.
All right, Randy, and we all know that President Trump endorsed Julia Letlow, and he went to Truth Social just now to post this. He said, quote, Bill Cassidy, after falsely using his relationship with me during his political career and winning elections because of it, voted to impeach me. And he goes on about his endorsement for Julia Letlow and congratulating Julia Letlow, who will be going to the runoff June 27th with John Fleming.
All right, let's check in with Cassie Sherm. She is in Baton Rouge covering John Fleming's campaign. Cassie, what's the latest? Have you been in touch with State Treasurer Fleming?
Well, unfortunately, no. John Fleming is not making himself available tonight to the media, unfortunately, and he did not have an election watch party, which is why we are out here outside the state capitol here in Baton Rouge. But when I spoke to him earlier, that during this election process, he had told me, you know, in the beginning of all of this, both Cassidy and Letlow were basically attacking each other when it came to those attack ads, to the point where finally, in the last 2 weeks before this election, they then started targeting him. And he said that was a major sign when it came to this race, and he felt pretty good today going into it.
Trump was impeached twice, and this could happen a third time, so he can't afford to have Cassidy to return. So he did refer to us as the two great people. So I really appreciate it, and I did sort of retweet that or tweet back. Thank you for that.
Now we'll be following up with Fleming to try to get that interview for you guys. But in the meantime, we're going to go send it over to Daryl at Cassidy's party right now.
Okay, right now, guys, Senator Bill Cassidy is still here, just over my shoulder here, talking to his supporters right now. And he just wrapped up his speech to his supporters just about 15 minutes ago. And I can tell you right now, Gina and Sulla, there was not a dry eye in the house. Several of his supporters were seen here crying as he was making his speech, because this is the end. This is the end of Senator Bill Cassidy's tenure come later on, come January of next year. But I can tell you that he did say that he did speak to Congresswoman Julia Letlow and also John Fleming and thank them and congratulate them on moving into the next steps into their runoff election. But he also talked about in his speech, he didn't say the president by name, but he did basically call the president out in some way, shape, or form in his speech, saying that even if you lose an election, don't claim that it was rigged or stolen, and just take it like a person with courage and dignity. And he says that's what he did today, and during this process today, as losing in this race. Also, Bill Cassidy talked about overall that he still feels great, even though that he's not going on to the next round in this election. He's proud of what he's done, not only in this race, but also what he's done in his well over a decade of serving for the people of Louisiana. So right now at this point, he's still here right now for the past 30, 15, 20 minutes, thanking his supporters one by one for what they've done for him all throughout this process. But he says even though he did lose, he's still going to fight for the people of Louisiana until his term ends. And what's interesting here is, In our state's history, he is the first incumbent senator to lose in a primary in our state, which is a remarkable statistic right there. But overall, though, he says he does feel good. And you kind of tell while he was speaking, there was some emotion, a little glisten in his eyes as he was speaking, because he knows that this is it. But he said that he, regardless of what happens, he wants to thank the people who brought him to the dance, if you will, and overall that even though it may not have been the overall turnout for him, he says that he's going to be proud of the way he ran his campaign and also how he served the people of the state of Louisiana. We're going to sit back to you all in the studio.
All right, hard-fought campaign there by Senator Bill Cassidy there, and a lot of people there sad tonight. A lot of his supporters and fans are listening to him concede.
And honestly, he had the biggest war chest in the race. We saw him with the most ads, the most ad buys and airtime, but still it just didn't turn out in his favor. 2 terms in the Senate, that has come to an end or will come to an end at the end of this term. All right, let's check in